But ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome to the 50th anniversary of the largest and best Triumph car club in the world. It's the TR Register. I'm Wayne Scott, editor of TR Action magazine, if you don't know who I am. And gathered here this evening are early members, volunteers, committee members, long-standing group leaders, and a whole host of people who've contributed to the past 5 decades of TR Register life. We meet here at Hopcrofts Holt, where 50 years ago, the very first meeting of the TR Register took place, and we'll learn about that momentous day from Terry and Val in just a moment. My words this evening, you'll be pleased to know, have been prepared to me by Ricky Gervais, so there'll be no controversy at all. But about the TR Register, through its aims to preserve the mark TR, the club membership has become a font of knowledge on our beloved cars. In fact, there's such a broad knowledge in the room that if someone was to drop a bomb on this place, I think no one would be left who knew anything about TRs. We've got aero-grade parts developed by Neil Revington, rallying expertise from the likes of Steve Hall. We've got gearbox guru with us, Pete Cox, and all those here from amazing TR specialists, Rob Sport, TRGB. They're all here in the room with us. It's amazing. And just last week, I learned how to make a suspension bush out of a strip of coolant hose, 2 nuts, and the cup off the top of a trolley jack by our very own Ray Mears of TRing, Phil Tucker, the trialer, who is also with us here today as well. So let's take ourselves back then to the beginnings of this great club. And back to 1969, and let's talk about the fact that for many the TR Register is more than a car club. It's actually a family, a way of life, and through its activities I'm sure it's given so many people in this room very special memories indeed, and it's those memories that we hope to share with you this evening and celebrate. So let's talk about 1969, when side-screen TRs are really cheap and can be picked up for around £125. Cheap indeed for a car capable of over 100 miles per hour. The standard Triumph factory that had originally launched TRs to such success over 15 years earlier had long since withdrawn support for the TR2 to 3A models and had itself been swallowed up into the British Leyland conglomerate. The factory's marketing-led loyalty club, the Triumph Sports Owners Association, had dwindled in the UK, and now in 1969, TR owners were struggling to source parts. And you'll have your own memories of what it was like to run a TR as everyday transport in that time. And of course, there was no classic car scene to speak of either, certainly not in the form that we know of today. Furthermore, there were not the racks full of motoring magazines that we enjoy today. Rather, a handful of main titles existed, and only one covering all aspects of motoring as a hobby and as a passion, and that was Motorsport magazine. Now, the editor of Motorsport magazine in 1969 was a guy called Bill Boddy, MBE, and he was an active motoring writer right up until he passed away in 2011 at the age of 98, amazingly. And he is considered by many as the longest-serving motoring journalist in history so far. You've got some catching up to do there, Graham. In November 1969, he published a letter from Mr. Douglas Thompson from Edinburgh entitled A Triumph TR Enthusiast. And in the letter, Mr. Thompson told the story of his past year of TR 3A ownership. During that time, he'd covered 12,000 miles, took part in motorsport most weekends, from rallies and sprints and tests, and had really undertaken very little maintenance on his car. However, he went on to say, and I quote, "The trouble is that I seem to be the only person who has any faith in the car. Whenever I enter the car for an event, without fail, at least one uncomplimentary remark will be passed, usually in the form of, 'That's a real handful you've got there,' or 'You're a brave man entering that thing.' So why is this then?" he asked in his letter. He also went on to ask, I feel it has been a reasonably cheap way of getting to 100-mile-an-hour performance and a great deal of fun, so I admit to being rather mystified as to the reason why TRs are so unloved amongst spectators and fellow competitors alike. Perhaps someone can provide an explanation. Well, the letter certainly started something, and soon replies were flooding in to Motorsport magazine. 3 letters followed in the December issue. One from David Adams, who claimed the side-screen TRs were the last of the true sports cars because, according to him, only those who are skilled at driving could keep them from crashing. Dubious accolade, I think. He said, compare with, say, an MGB. I'm putting on this voice, I don't know, he might not sound like that, I don't know. Compared with, say, the MGB, which is the most forgiving car I have ever driven, the TR is lethal in the wrong hands, lethal. Definitely a dubious accolade, and the one that included the claim that his TR3A blew off E-types at will and was, and I quote, the best mechanical sporting machine ever. I think he was a TR fan. Fate was perhaps sealed with the letter from Darrell U. Pritchard of Sunbury-on-Thames, who we see in front of us here this evening, much later, of course, of Race-to-Rations, and to serve as the president of the TR Register, who wrote in to congratulate the publication on covering the story and to extol the virtues of the model, ending with this line. Personally, I find the TR an exciting car with much character. A TR Register, perhaps? But it was the letter from a Terence J. Simpson. Good evening, Terry. Thank you for being with us. And it was that letter that really got the ball rolling. His letter began, like Mr. D. Thompson, I too am at a loss to see why there is not a more enthusiastic following for the Triumph TR. My interest in these cars started in 1964 when I purchased a 1955 TR2 for £210. Pushed the boat out there, Terry, didn't you? Blimey. Terry went on to explain how exciting the car was to drive and how easy it had been to maintain, before ending with, if there are any other TR enthusiasts around, I'd be only too pleased to hear from them. Regrettably, it seems that Mr. Thompson is the only TR owner who shares my enthusiasm. Was he about to be proved wrong? I think so. The correspondence continued with the March 1970 issue, continuing with an outpouring of support for the TR model. The subject then dominated the magazine's correspondences pages right through until the following spring of 1970, whereupon editor Bill Boddy, MBE, cried, enough, and called things to a conclusion on all things TR. But of course, by then, the TR Register had already started. Meanwhile, Terry Simpson had taken his invitation to the next level and had, with his own money, placed adverts in Motorsport magazine and in Exchange and March to invite replies from those who would like to form a much-needed club. On the 19th of December 1969, he wrote a letter out to all those who had contacted him in response to those adverts, in reply, all 54 of them, inviting them to an inaugural meeting. And it was here at Hopcrofts Holt where that meeting took place. And luckily, both he and Valerie, his wife, who would go on to run the club, are, as I say, with us this evening, and we'll be talking to them in just a moment. But to tell us a little bit about where Triumph was, and to tell us a little bit about his role as president of the TR Register, I'd like you to put your hands together and welcome on stage our president, Graham Robson.
I have one of these real microphones to play with. Young man, you may sit down.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for asking me here to apologise for whenever the last time was I was talking in a microphone. I would like you to know that about the first 2 or 3 pages of what my man has been saying tonight were written by me, bastards. which means I can throw half of this away. And that wasn't serious because it gives me enormous pleasure to be, if you like, to be accepted by people like you, because he and I get on well together and we at least can bring a bit of lightness into what could be a solemn occasion. Now then, I've got 2.5 pages of large type, which means it's not going to go on for long, not necessarily to tell you about the development of the TR register, but really how I got involved with it and how I was involved with the TR during the years that passed between 1970, when Terry and Co set up the club, and this wonderful club we now have, 50 years old. So it's great to be here, having told Wayne what he is, and sorry about that, mate. Let's now hope that there's no one here who hates me as much as I think some of them do. Please don't shout now. I'll see you guys in the bar later. I feel very humble to be surrounded by all these TR register characters, some of whom have got a lot more previous than I have, a lot more distinguished previous than I have. It comes from even people like my friend who I was talking to before we came in. I said, "Where are you living now?" He said, "I'm in Oban." I said, "Nobody lives in Oban." He said, "You've never been to Oban," and so on. And there's a lot of it about. Somewhere out there's someone from Spain. Are you here tonight? Where are you? There he is. So they've come from all corners of Europe. Yes, Dave Lewis, that is, Dave Lewis, somewhere from Spain. Thank you for coming. Right, so let me get involved in what my involvement has been. First of all, in 1970, of course, I was one of these young bloods who was writing for a living. I'd been with Autocar for some years. I still decided I was going to be a world-famous engineer, and I joined Chrysler UK in Coventry because I lived and had lived in Coventry since 1957. And I wasn't involved with TRs at the time, but of course, the TR folklore was all around in Coventry, and the local knowledge of what was going on kept me closely in touch. I was an engineer at the time. I was actually running a product proving team at Chrysler UK, and not allowed to laugh, developing new cars that were still coming along, like the Chrysler Avenger. Sold well, made money, don't laugh. It also helped me get some pension fund going. I'd already, for the fun and games though, the same year I'd been invited to be a travelling controller on the World Cup Rally, which was to follow from London to Mexico, and that was, I could go on for hours and I won't. So, a few years later, having decided that I really wasn't going to be a world-famous engineer, but I really thought I could make a living as a motoring writer and historian, I was working for myself, and I'm just noting here, 1974, by this time, a fully independent writer, mainly with Autocar and Autosport, and my first major book was The Story of Triumph Sports Cars, which was a famous book at the time, and it's now full of mistakes. Thank you very much, and you can correct them afterwards if you like. But that was 1974. Later on in the 1970s, in the late 70s, I got together with a very distinguished American friend of mine, Richard Langworth, to produce a monumental book, which I thought at the time would be the everlasting history of Triumph, called Triumph, the Complete Story. That was republished this year, and yes, it's on sale. I haven't got any with me, but it's on sale, and I'm told it's doing very well. So that really got me thoroughly involved in Triumph again. Nevertheless, it was a surprise that I was approached in 1994 by Rosie. Where's Rosie? Hello, where are you, Rosie? Right, okay, I can't see anything, you see that. But Rosie, Andy and Evans between them said, "We think Darrell Rue Pritchard's decided that being an honorary president isn't as much fun as making £1 million, which I'm told he's made £1 million as well. And we're looking for a new honorary president. We're not going to pay you any money. We're looking for a president that people have heard of." And I was sort of drafted into this. Now, as soon as I said yes, and by the way, talk about things being circular, I understand I was elected at the AGM of November 1994. It was held in this very hotel in 25 years ago, so how about that? Now then, I rapidly learned as much about the register as I could, how it originally had only been for side screen cars and how you'd had battles here and there as to whether you should even allow the Michelotti cars here in, and later on, of course, whether you would even allow the what I call the British Leyland cars, the Harris Mann cars. I see Steve Redway down here leering at me, and Steve knows more about those stories than I do, and you shall have a chance to talk about it later, Steve Redway. I was only an honourary member, and therefore I wasn't allowed to give my opinion on these things. But it seemed to me that at the time, the club was in danger of strangling itself by not taking on the numbers that came to it later on. And I think I'm right in saying now that we have a majority of the Michelotti cars on the register, as opposed to the ones that weren't going to be allowed at the time. So I'm delighted to see that the register is so stable after all these years. My only direct involvement, and I'm an old man, as you can see, and I'm very rickety, I really can't get in and out of a TR anymore. I board a TR4A at home in Dorset for a friend of mine who is an overseas member who lives in Thailand, comes home twice a year to drive his TR4A, and occasionally I get emails saying, has it been out recently? Well, the answer is we had it out last weekend, and it still works. So that's the closest I'm getting to direct involvement in TR driving at the moment. If you like, I'm just a figurehead. I'm a rotten figure, and I'm a rotten head, but I'm a figurehead. You've had me around for some time. I'm involved in the sort of having the big ideas and then standing back to see people make losses. And I think I can claim that I really invented the 75th anniversary of the Triumph name event at Gaydon. I also invented Star 90, which was held a few years ago. Right now in Triumph Forum, I've already started barracking to all the clubs involved about the centenary, which is coming up in 4 years' time. Correction, 3 years' time. So now we celebrate 50 years ahead of the Triumph centenary itself, which I've just mentioned. And once again, here we are at Hopcrofts Holt. It's quieter here than it used to be. I don't know if you've noticed, but the USAF bomber base up the road at Upper Hayford has now closed, and it's got very quiet these days. Last page coming up. We don't come here often, and in fact, the last time I was here, and I'm sure everyone's going to say I was here as well, do you remember 10 years ago for the 40th, we all came here and there was an incredible snowstorm? And I have to admit this, that most of you arrived in TRs. The car park out there was full of snow. You were just about mobile. I came in my road car, which was a BMW at the time, and I got stuck. And it serves me right. It serves me right. But I shall remember that event when I was asked to, when Paul Hogan and your chairman, Alan, said, come along. I thought, Hopcrofts Holt, where Robson made a fool of himself. Time to do it again tonight. So what happens next? Well, to your joy, I'm about to stop talking. And as often happens so often, I'm going to hand over to my good friend Wayne, who will host the rest of the evening. Unless something goes wrong, you'll not have to suffer our now notorious double act. But Wayne and I enjoy the double act, so I'm not quite sure what may happen later in the evening.
They'll have it tomorrow.
I have only one advantage over Wayne, only one. I was here when he was still at primary school. So if he and various distinguished guests get it wrong, you might hear me say bollocks on the sidelines sometimes when other people are on the microphone. I promise not to interfere any more than that. Accordingly, many thanks for putting up with me for so many years. Over to Wayne.
Graham Robson, everyone. Thank you, Graham. Just before you leave the stage, Graham, talk to me about 1969 at Triumph at the time. What was happening in the company? Because we just launched the TR6. Where was Triumph at in terms of its survival into the future and its support of the models that it had?
Well, Triumph was very much the favourite of Lord Stokes at the time. You're not allowed to spit when I mention Lord Stokes. It is my opinion that he was unlucky. He wasn't incompetent, he was unlucky. But Lord Stokes was very much a Triumph fan. He was now the boss of British Leyland. He was determined to talk up Triumph, and if you look back into the histories that are shall we say, the truthful histories, you'll find that Stokes was looking to make Triumph the British BMW, and he was looking to do 16-valve engines in Dolomites and all sorts of things like that. Triumph was definitely, I would say, the biggest power in the land in Coventry, the other two being Chrysler UK and Jaguar, of course. So Triumph in '69 was in the first year of British Leyland, before all the strikes followed and things like it. They were going well.
And of course, I mentioned earlier, the Triumph Sports Owners Association, which essentially was Triumph's own sort of factory club. And it was a marketing-led thing where they wanted you to join a club with your side screen TR to be a part of the Triumph family. It was a great way of selling accessories to you, but that had dwindled by the time 1969 had come along.
I have to say, let me ask a question first of all. Is there anyone here who used to be a member of the TSOA? Only Darryl, because Darryl's so old. You're not as old as me, mate. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that Wayne is right.
One up there as well. One round the corner.
The fact of the matter is that when Leyland took over Standard Triumph and got the new regime going, they really lost interest in the TSOA. And as you say, they allowed it to wither on the vine. So by the end of the 60s, it was still there nominally, but it wasn't really an active club at all.
Of course, what we must mention, though, is it does remain an active club in our overseas regions.
Indeed.
And has been ever since. And we'll talk a bit more about overseas regions of the TR Register. But for now, Graham Robson, Honorary President of the TR Register, thank you very much. Big hand.
Which is that mine? Yes, it is.
Thank you, Graham.